But we're proof that black and white can work together, as long as we get paid.
My God, man. Do you know what this means? This skitter's gonna be turned upside down, I tell you, upside down. If you get on his bad side, brother, you're done for. Now, it's only a matter of time before he finds out, and when he does, no matter where he is, get ready, gentlemen, because hell's a-coming, hell's a-coming, hell's a-coming, hell's a-coming, hell's a-coming.
It's a tough mission, but I think you're ready.
If we're going to save the colonies, we're going to need top Gundam pilots. Transforming Wing Gundam is the most powerful Gundam in the galaxy. But before you can unleash its full potential, you have to transform it from mobile suit mode to bird mode. That's why we need pilots with an ability to take on Gundam mechanics. To beat the best, you have to be the best.
Hey, this is Stephanie Shea, and you're listening to Gundam at MAHQ.
Hey, Ricky, how you doing? Lee, I see you got everything under control, man. I'm gonna go downstairs and the gun. Damn! What happened to rain?
All right, everybody, welcome back to Gundam at MAHQ. This is one of your hosts, Neo, and joining me always is the Soul Bro and the Chris. Guys, say hello.
Good evening.
Hello.
All right. And this is episode 272 of Gundam at MAHQ, and we're going to be discussing the 40th anniversary of a little show that, you know, we've kind of talked about a few times, VOTOMS. And yeah, so we're definitely going to be checking that out. And we have a special guest. And it's actually interesting because what is going on here? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, hold on one second.
Yes.
Let me just drop real quick.
All right,
And
cool.
I'll go back in. Sorry.
Yeah, there's a little bit of feedback coming from somewhere. I'm not sure where, though.
Okay, sorry about that.
All right, welcome back.
But so yes, I'm sorry. We have a special guest, Tim Eldred, and he's joining us. He joined us back in, it's like kind of ironic, episode 72 of Gundam at MAHQ, and now he's going to be joining us in our discussion of VOTOMS again in episode 272, and we promise you we did not plan that out. So it's just one of those weird coincidences. Tim, say hello.
Hello, people of planet Earth, of which I am also from that planet myself. Hello.
Welcome.
All right, I think I found my issue.
Oh, thank goodness. I was
weird.
Yeah, I think
That noise?
Yeah, that sounded like we were in the middle of a windstream or some shit.
Well, it is windy here, but I don't have the windows open. So yeah, sorry about that. Sorry about that stream.
There you go.
For once it wasn't Soul Bro doing some crazy stuff.
For
It was
once.
me.
Who knew?
Yeah. There we go. So,
Jesus.
but Tim, thank you for joining us. I know it's been a while. What have you been up to since the last time we spoke? Anything that you'd like to plug on or anything before we get into our little discussion
what
here?
haven't I been up to?
Oh, I see where you're going with that.
Well, let's see. In the time since then, I crossed the 20th anniversary of my Star Blazers / Space Battleship Yamato website.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
As of August of last year, I hit the 20-year mark of me documenting my favorite sci-fi anime.
Oh, awesome.
That's freaking amazing.
And yeah, I'm quite proud of that. I still update it every month on the 15th of every month. And because that wasn't nearly enough work, I started up a new website about, is it a year and a half? No, I guess it's about 2 years ago now, called Art Vault. The URL for that is timeldred.com. And I wanted to start doing that so I could document all the crazy and cool and weird and wild stuff I've been working on as an artist, going all the way back to when I was 12 years old. And I have an anime element to that site where I just talk about my favorite anime. And just a little over a year ago, I started talking about VOTOMS again.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
So it was like catching up with an old friend and learning all the things that I've always wanted to learn. The Star Blazers website kind of kicked my butt into gear in terms of finding new routes for collecting things and also doing translations. And now I'm applying all of that stuff to VOTOMS. And so in the last year, I've published a ton of interviews and like product catalogs and art galleries and all sorts of stuff. So I'm back in the fold, baby.
Hey, man, back in the saddle. It's been too long.
And I will definitely affirm that it's an invaluable reference if you want to do a deep dive on VOTOMS lore and merchandise, and it's a very good resource for the franchise.
Yeah, I update that website on the 1st of the month. And I just finished the latest round of VOTOMS stuff yesterday. So you'll be seeing it quite soon.
The VOTOMS...
You update your websites like a social program, the 1st and 15th of every month. So.
Yeah, that's right.
That's good of you.
Yeah, but it's a lot of work though. As soon as I finish one, I got to get right on the other one.
I bet. I mean, I sometimes wonder how, we deal with Chris a lot and his adventures with MAHQ, which is, what year are you in now, Chris? Like 20 something?
Well, on April 1st, which is the 40th anniversary of VOTOMS, is also the 23rd anniversary of MAHQ.
That is crazy, son.
Wow.
Yeah, MHQ's been drinking for the last 2 years, so it's,
and in 2 years it can rent a car, drive away, never to be seen again.
And 12 years ago, you could get a gun.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we just hear with some of the things that he has to go through. So it's definitely, it's. We sometimes envy your commitment or your insanity of doing these things. So,
I sometimes don't envy my commitments. So take from that what you will.
There you go. So, but yeah, interesting enough. So, all right. So, just for everybody out there, we're not going to go into any news. So, unfortunately, if you submitted some articles, we'll just have to catch up next episode. So, because we kind of wanted to get into this whole little discussion. I mean, 40 years of VOTOMS, a lot to kind of talk about here. So, Chris, I'll just kind of pop it over to you so you can kind of get us started off here.
Sure. So we probably covered this 12 years ago, but for the sake of our newer listeners, Tim, could you tell us how and when you first discovered VOTOMS, and also as an anime fan back then, what discoverability and access was like compared to now.
All right. Well, get comfortable.
Oh.
I ran into it pretty close to when it was still in real time.
Wow.
I think I saw my first episode in 1984, maybe that summer. And that would have been shortly after the original series went off the air for the first time.
Absolutely.
And my actual first thing that I ever saw was a model kit, 1/24 scale scope dog. And I remember exactly which one it was because I own it. It's sitting on my shelf today.
Oh, man.
Wow.
And that design just jumped off the box and grabbed me by the face and said, okay, this is what you're going to pay attention to for the rest of your life.
And you've been forever in
And
this
did
grip.
that
Wow.
did
It
it
was
jump
right.
out at you because you already were kind of like into like sci-fi and military designs? What was it about the scope dog that spoke to you?
Well, I was already an artist myself, and I already loved anime thanks to seeing Star Blazers on TV. And I was going all over the place to different hobby stores and looking for imported stuff. Mostly Space Battleship Yamato kits, but other things would interest me too. You know, Macross was really big around that time, so I was collecting Macross kits. And, you know, they're super flashy because it's a fighter plane that turns into a super cool robot, and it's got all these robot pals and robot enemies, and so Macross kits were piled high, right?
Oh, wow.
And I think that's probably what created the channel, other things to jump into. You know, I'm just imagining that if you ran a hobby store back then and you ordered a bunch of Macross models, you would get some other things thrown into that same box just to fill up the extra space, right?
Right.
And so whatever was contemporary with that would find its way over. And VOTOMS was one of those things. And so I went to a store, I think it was in Detroit, Michigan, and right there in the pile with Macross was this VOTOMS thing. I called it VOTOMS then because I was dumb. And I only read it, you know, I didn't hear it spoken by anybody. But that design was just so elemental. There was something so captivating about it that I couldn't get it out of my head. And I learned much later that was, you know, by design, literally, because Kunio Okawara, mecha designer for the show, specifically set out after his experience on previous shows like Gundam and Gundam to create a design that wouldn't have to be messed with when it went into 3D.
Yeah.
And so if it got made into toys and model kits, it would look exactly like what he designed. And that forced him to think more deeply about how the frame should be structured, how the limbs would move, where your power source would be, how a human would actually get in and out of it. And it was also fueled by the director's goal, that's Ryusuke Takahashi, of making a more human-scaled giant robot. Something that you could put next to a vehicle and you would instantly know how big it was. And that was after working on Gundam for over a year, and realizing that the Gundam was kind of too large to relate to if you were a human being, thinking on human scale. And from animation purposes, it also made it hard to stage characters interacting with the robot, because if you've got a guy up there in the cockpit, you know, like 6 stories off the ground, talking to another guy on the ground, one of them is going to have to be a fly spec.
Yeah.
And that's really difficult to sell in terms of story and visual drama. And so he said, all right, the next show we're going to scale down the robots. We're going to get something about the size of a Jeep. And so that decision and like 1,000 others all fused together into what I consider to be the perfect anime mecha, and that is the Scope Dog.
Yes.
And the fact that it's still popular, you know, 40 years later, and and it's still getting tributes built to it. There's a city in Japan, Kunio Okawara's hometown, where a few years ago they erected a 1/1 scale scope dog.
Yes, indeed.
Oh wow.
And it's gorgeous, and it looks spot on, exactly like what he designed. And so it's this legacy design that I think has become timeless. Enough time has gone by where if somebody was capable of deconstructing anime robots farther than Kunio Okawara, they would have done it already.
Yeah.
So he's still
Yeah.
the king. He still has that crown. And
To that point, I was just talking with someone earlier tonight saying that even though the Scope Dog is now a 40-year-old design, that like it is completely unchanged. And even if you watch something newer in CG like Pales and Files or Phantom Arc, yeah, it's depicted in CG, but it's pretty much the exact same design from 1983. Like they really didn't do anything to it.
Yeah. And I always
It's-
think within the story that the thing that's cool about it is it's disposable. It's just a tool in a lot of ways. It's how many times did we see Cherryco blow one up and get a new one? I mean, it's just
A lot.
It's just way different when you talk about mecha animes where the title mecha is always it always ends up being very valuable. It's not it's only blown up or severely damaged for the mid-season upgrade.
It's one of a kind, basically. And
Yeah, it's one of a kind.
If
It's
they
always
lose
a
it, they're
prototype.
screwed. Yeah.
Yeah,
Not in
I mean,
VOTOMS, man. It's the realest robot, the scope dog for the most part. You see Chirico going through it like toilet tissue. It's like
It's armored like toilet tissue.
no,
sometimes.
exactly. X to the next.
I'm gonna ask you guys for a small favor, at least for the duration of this discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Try and pronounce it Kiriko.
Kiriko. Okay. So
For me, please.
okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So that's the proper way to say his name. Is that correct?
In the show, it's pronounced Kiriko.
Kiriko.
And
Oh,
Here we go.
that's how I've been pronouncing it since the first time I've heard it.
gotcha.
Okay. No problem.
That'll be the way I proceed with saying his
Thank
name.
you.
There you
Thank
go.
you very much.
You're very welcome.
So, you asked me how Access worked back then.
Mm-hmm.
That was long before we had any kind of a import network, where companies were built just for the purpose of importing anime.
Oh yeah.
And so the only thing you could do was hope to find someone who already had copies of episodes. And that meant that somebody at the top of the chain had to live in Japan and record it off TV and send a tape out to a friend overseas. And we were extraordinarily lucky that there were people in Japan willing to do that. That's how the entire first generation of anime fandom was built in the 80s on VHS tape trading.
It's like the Underground Railroad of tapes.
Yep, exactly. But in pretty short order, we learned how to order things directly from Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Once in a while, some miraculous thing would happen. There's a store over there called Animate, which is still around. And in an issue of, I think it was Animage magazine,
Mm-hmm.
they once put an ad in there in English for overseas customers.
Nice.
Yeah, and it was a new business they had set up called Animate World Service, and they listed a few products you could order from them. So I said, hey, I'm going to try this out. And the first thing I ordered was the OVA VHS tape for The Last Red Shoulder.
Oh wow.
And those were the days before we had any kind of PayPal arrangement. I had to go to my local bank and get a money order written up in Japanese yen, and I had to put that in the mail.
Oh wow.
And 2 weeks later, I had the tape in my hand.
OVAs were notoriously expensive back then. How much did that run you?
I think about $65.
Oh, that's not bad. That's not bad. I mean, granted,
Yeah,
for a single OVA.
1980s
That's
money?
still a lot,
Yeah.
but in 1980s money, yeah, that's still not bad for inflation.
That's still,
I've
yeah.
you know what? I'm gonna look that up and see what it costs today. But that's wild.
Yeah, the dollar was in our favor back then,
Yeah.
Yeah.
as it is now. Again, so I paid less than $65, I'm sure. So we had that. We had Books Nippon, which was one of the first well-known American sources for Japanese stuff, because they had stores in Japan and in America, and so they had a direct pipeline and they could get just about anything. And so that's how I got my first soundtrack LPs.
Wow.
Ordering from Books Nippon. First Roman albums came through Books Nippon.
Nice.
And this stuff just kept growing exponentially year by year because more people were getting into the hobby. But you still had to be a scrounger. You still had to know how to hunt for things.
Right.
And that's what made it fun, because you never quite knew what you were going to find. I had friends who would jump in a car with me, like at once or twice a month, and we would drive to another city. We were in Michigan, and we could either drive to Chicago or Detroit in about the same amount of time, and we knew where the stores were, and we knew where the Japanese neighborhoods were. So little by little, we would collect stuff. We would amass things over years, and I love that I still have the instincts that I built during that time, because I've learned all sorts of ways to find treasure online. And now it's, of course, much easier. You don't have to drive there. So I've been renewing my drive to collect every VOTOMS thing ever made.
Wow.
Well, I'm going to back off on that, because I don't collect model kits and garage kits. I've got just too many of them piled up already.
Oh, true.
Yeah, but I've been...
You gonna set up in the corner the patchy slot machine?
Yeah, that sort of thing is out of reach. But I got every tactical game. Just recently got the one I was missing, the Cumin game. It's pretty cool. And I got a big paper-graphed scope dog over there in the corner. And a couple of little odd toys that were made back in the 80s. So it's great. I love being back into this. Oh, and I've also just about completed a collection of comic bonbon. Do you know what that is?
I've heard of it, but what is it?
Yeah,
exactly?
I've heard of it too. What exactly is it? Yeah.
That was a monthly anime manga magazine. And it was mostly geared toward kids who would buy model kits and toys.
Right.
And for the duration of 1983, they ran the first monthly VOTOMS manga by Minoru Nonaka. He's the guy who drew the manga that keeps getting reprinted decade after decade. And it was originally serialized in Comic Bonbon.
Oh, nice.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was quite different. There were a lot of differences in the art, and a lot of pages were redone. The paperback versions and the later reprint versions. So it's a real time bubble. And in that same magazine, they had manga for like Elgheim and Dunbine and Vifam, and it was sort of tied in with the shows that were on the air at the time. Oh, Giant Gorg is in there too. And then they would run pages on model kits you could buy and toys you could buy. And if I had lived in Japan back in 1983, this is for sure the thing I would buy every month.
It sounds like the magazine to be subscribed to. Reminds me of when I came up in the 90s, and I would pick up a Die Hard Game Fan, which had a lot of import stores in the back of it where you can import anime stuff if you wanted to, or games, which was the way you describe having to go on the hunt for anime merchandise and comic books. Just books and anime in general. Reminds me of the way I had to go after import games in the mid '90s for the Sega Saturn and whatnot. And I kind of miss going on a hunt like that and looking for these hard to find, obscure titles that weren't not well known in the States at the time. It's night and day how the world is now when it comes to anime in general. And you were there to see pretty much the whole transition of it going from
it really
something
felt
niche.
like a quest.
Yeah.
It felt like you were seeking something out that nobody else knew about.
Yeah, man.
It became very personal.
The best kept secrets.
Let me ask you this: you say that you're now doing it in the internet age, electronic age.
Yeah.
And you said that you still feel the same way when you start to do but are you finding it easier to find things now? I mean, with the just kind of, it seems like a lot of old stuff, and I think we've talked about it for a couple of years now on this show. It seems like there's kind of like this movement of going to things like prior to 2000s. Are you finding some of this stuff easier to find now, or is it still
it depends
kind
on
of
what
the
you're
challenge?
looking for. It depends on what you're looking for. One thing I really like about hunting down things like Comic Bonbon is that I know almost nobody else is looking for it.
Yeah.
So if I find one in an online auction, I'm pretty much guaranteed to win it, which is a nice feeling. But you got to be willing to pay a lot of money because these are also antiques, and people in Japan know how rare they are. But it's sort of the same thing when I go into a convention dealer's room. Very few people there are going to be looking for VOTOMS stuff from the 1980s.
Oh, true.
So,
why is that, you think?
Everybody else can go hunt down their Spy Family figures. I'll be over on that side.
Why do you feel? Do you have a theory of why that is? I mean, it's VOTOMS has always seemed like it's got kind of a niche, but it's there. It's long lasting. Do you feel like there's?
Well, context is everything. It's long lasting because those who are really devoted to it discovered it quite a while ago.
Right.
But it's not really built to compete with stuff that's being made right now.
Yeah, sure.
Very true.
And there's nothing wrong with that. There's some great stuff being made right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I think everybody probably goes through a similar series of steps where they absorb all the new anime they can.
Mm-hmm.
And then when some bandwidth opens up, they start going back in time.
Right.
One metaphor I found to describe this is like you're on a train.
Mm-hmm.
This train has been rolling ever since Astro Boy came out, right? In the 60s.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And you will get on the newest car that's been added to the train. In whatever decade you get involved with anime, that's the car you get on.
Yeah.
And when you explore everything in that car, you can start to make your way backward on the train to the earlier cars. Because they're all still attached, and they're still full of treasure. That's one thing I love the most about anime. It's very democratic. And it's very well documented. So all of the stuff that has been around is still around, and you can find it. And it's just as much fun to discover now as it was, years and years ago.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of kind of describing it because I think it's you have your comfort food, and like you said, it's what you were raised in. I think in everything, a lot of people, they always go back to the areas they identify when it comes to music or whatever, whatever they're in, the sports figures, whatever it could be, and it's always that special thing of when they discover it, because I guess that's when you attach ownership to something. It's like, okay, this is mine. Like, you mentioned, VOTOMS and Star Blazers, Yamato, those are things that you discovered when you were younger. And it's like, okay, these are the things that made me happy when I was trying to search for all these things. And I think all of us have that. I mean, I know the three of us have talked about that many a times on the show. We have different things.
Whichever thing grabbed you and woke you up, turned you on, so to speak.
Yeah.
Is the thing you're going to still be committed to.
Yeah.
Your first love.
However, what that means is the farther back in time it is, the more time it's going to take other people to work their way back in the train to find it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's true.
We see that time and time again. But what's cool about anime today is it'll reference a lot of classic stuff. And you'll get turned on to going back and checking out some of the older stuff. At least those who are open to checking out older anime will do that. And with streaming, it's so easy now to be able to go and check out something that, say, references VOTOMS. Hell, the Super Robot War series. A lot of people are introduced to Kiriko in those games. So a lot of people don't know, what he's about, but they like him instantly because he's such a cool character in those games. So I hope that alone has turned a lot of people onto VOTOMS. But yeah, a lot of people have love for that. Speaking of gaming, just to divert for a second, do you think that VOTOMS has had a lot of influence on gaming? I know that Kojima has, I believe he's admitted he's a fan, especially of Mellow Link, which I think contributed a lot to Metal Gear in general. And then the game Titanfall, that series, anytime I see that, I think the gem of that idea came from VOTOMS as well. I don't think they've ever admitted to that, but to me, anytime I see that game, and we have a dear friend that loves playing it, it reminds me so much of
Titanfall,
VOTOMS.
we know, took some inspiration from what's this?
The Starship Troopers?
Gigantia.
Oh, Gigantia? Oh, I didn't know. I didn't know.
I mean, well, think of the campaign of Titanfall 2.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And then think about Gigantia.
Fair enough. It's just the size of the mecha in that. They're bigger than Scope Dogs, but still, they're not much bigger in a sense. So just a way to get in and out of the suits and whatnot. I see a lot of VOTOMS in it, to say the least. But back to you. Any thoughts on that at all?
I think it's just natural because the people who are making stuff now grew up on stuff they loved back in the 80s and the 90s, and they saw probably the same stuff we did. If you are open to it and it lights you up, you're going to find a way to channel it. There's nothing wrong with that, and it's how one generation fuels the next generation. And so if you see a game that came from Japan that kind of looks and feels like VOTOMS, I guarantee you the person who created that game was a fan at some level.
I wouldn't doubt it.
And the stuff is everywhere over there. I don't know if you guys have been there. I've been over a dozen times, and
Man.
It's like just new layers keep getting added to the sediment, and so every time you go, there's new stuff piled on top of the old stuff, and the old stuff is still there. It's still moving.
That's awesome. I've never been personally. I've always wanted to go though, and I've had plenty of friends to have gone there and just will tell me the things they've run into, and we're able to find and locate rare things, things they never even knew existed, merchandise associated with animes that they've grown up watching and whatnot. But that's fantastic. When was the last time you went?
Oh man, I haven't been since October of 2019.
Oh man,
it's like the last window before COVID world.
Hey,
you picked the perfect time unknowingly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because
well,
they were really harsh.
There happened to be a typhoon that weekend.
Ooh.
So I was blocked in my hotel room for a day.
Oh, jeez.
That sucks. Well, I'm glad you got out of that safe.
Yeah, and it gave me some stories. So nothing wrong with that.
There you go. What a trade.
And I'd really like to get back. Usually I plan trips around Yamato movies.
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
I don't know when the next one's coming, so still keeping watch.
So one thing I've been curious about, when I got into the franchise over 20 years ago, the end point was Shining Heresy, and it seemed like it was going to be that way forever. And then in 2007, we got Aeons and Files, and for the next couple of years, we got a bunch of OVAs, and I still wonder sometimes, how is it that that sort of mini renaissance even came to be, and also why did it end when it did? Do you have any theories or insights on that?
I think the key to getting that stuff started was the 25th anniversary. And I say that because over the past year, for my website, I've been translating a lot of articles, or interviews rather, with both production people and manufacturers. Like, for example, the garage kit company Wave is the one that makes the most garage kits for VOTOMS. And so I translated an interview with a developer for Wave. I've just recently done one with a group in Takara that did the Actic Gear toy line.
Oh.
And the common thread that I keep seeing in them is that the people who were involved in making those products came up as fans. You know, they watched the show in a real time, and it fueled with them with this desire to pay off what Okawara did with the design to make it translatable to 3D. And everybody seems to have their favorite thing they want to make, and then they somehow end up making that thing. And they've all noted that there is this kind of wave that keeps coming in terms of sales for garage kits and model kits. Like every 5 years or so, there will suddenly be more and more interest. And I think it's probably tied in with anniversaries on one level. It's certainly tied in with new products or new video releases. In 2005, there was a big DVD set that was released, and that was a wave that lifted all the boats because suddenly it was accessible again. You know, there was a new version of it that you could go buy all in one shot. So every time there's a big video release, it always lends more power to what's happening. And around the 25th anniversary is when they started making new products, you know, new toy products, and the sales were picking up. And Takahashi was writing a new novelization, I think. And that's when he started developing Paleson files. So when it came back to anime, that fueled more things. Unfortunately, he then went on to do Phantom Arc, and that was a big flop.
Ooh.
Yeah. Phantom Arc did not do well.
Damn.
And it doesn't surprise me, because that's the one and only VOTOMS thing I really don't like.
Oh, wow. That's saying a lot.
Yeah, I wanted to like it, but it was fan service in the worst way.
Yeah.
Where they were so preoccupied with trying to relive the original experience that they didn't make anything new with it. Just sort of revisited old stuff and mixed it up a little bit and then moved on. So it didn't work well. Certainly didn't work for me, and I'm thinking that it probably didn't work well for Japanese audiences either. And so when you have a video series that, you know, it's very expensive to make, and it doesn't do well, whoever made that is not going to want to throw more money into that pot. And so
I think it also didn't help. Sorry, I think it also didn't help that Alone Again, which actually is set in between Shining Heresy and Phantom Arc, was actually the last thing to come out, which always really confused me, and that didn't make any sense at all why you would do that way.
Yeah, that's another weird thing about it. There's a lot of different stories that all link together, and they were all made out of order. If you watch them in chronological story order, they make a lot of sense. If you try and watch them in the order they were made, good luck.
Yeah, we had the benefit of watching them primarily in order. So, yeah, you can definitely see that. You can definitely see that people would be confused watching it in production order. And that's why your resource of a site is going to come in handy for a lot of people.
Yeah, I hope so.
Well, jumping off what you just said, if Phantom Arc is not your favorite VOTOMS entry, what is?
I think the original TV series in terms of story, you still can't top that because it's so big and so massive, and it takes full advantage of its scale.
Yeah.
In terms of animation quality, Big Battle is still my favorite of the OVAs.
Oh,
because
nice.
I think everybody looks exactly the way they're supposed to.
Yeah.
They're on model from start to finish. If all VOTOMs looked like that, there would be no hesitation at all for people to go back and look at an older anime. And so, and it's kind of cool because it's self-contained. So if you want to introduce somebody to the show, it's a great way to start.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
It's a quick, self-contained story. It looks great, and it's fun to watch.
With VOTOMS Yazan Gable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
anything that came after that is so steeped in the continuity that it's really hard to step in if you don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I'm watching VOTOMS with a friend who had never seen it, and he really loves it. We actually were literally watching it right before this recording. We're up to the Sunset arc.
Oh.
And I'm showing him the TV series first. Then we're going to watch all of the prequels and sequels in chronological order because I'm trying to avoid the trap that VOTOMS unfortunately falls into where the prequels go and pre-spoil things that you're not supposed to know until the main series. And that to me has always been a bit of a mark against some of the prequel OVAs like Roots of Ambition and Pales and Files that, you know, they're telling Kiriko stuff that he's not supposed to know until the TV show.
Oh,
and you,
wow.
by extension, you, the viewer.
Yeah, Pales and Files especially.
Yeah.
But if you watch the TV series first, and then take everything else in story order, you'll do just fine.
Yeah, I think it also, you know, it rewatching with my friend who's never seen it, it speaks to the enduring power of the series because, you know, he's big into stuff like Warhammer and Gundam, and he's all for it. And, you know, even as dated as this show is in terms of animation and stuff like that, he's still digging it. So I feel like it has appeal to new audiences long after its original airing.
Yes, indeed. I'm looking at the thread on the YouTube page here, and Yazi is coming up with some good points here. He says, Last Red Shoulder is an easy watch, as in between parts of a TV show, nothing is really spoiled there. That is correct. You could slot that right in between Udo and Cumin. However, it becomes a better story if you watch Roots of Ambition before you watch Last Red Shoulder.
Nice.
Yeah,
and
for the Pales and connection.
Yeah. And so I'm with him on one point, but I disagree on another.
Yeah, Yazi's our resident VOTOMS nut. Big fan. His icon on Twitter is Chirico with the coffee cup. The shot of him from Super Robot Wars.
Sorry, who?
Sorry, Kiriko. Oh my gosh.
Oh,
God, yeah, yo, squirt me with some cold water.
Man.
Just squirt me with some cold water. I'll get it. Gotta undo 20 years of nonsense. Kiriko. Yes. Yeah, that's his icon for him, and yeah, loves it. Matter of fact, I know he had some questions for us. I'll ask one for now and save the other ones for later. But he writes, I am a. He says, do you guys have a particular favorite Scope Dog variant / custom unit? He continues saying, I'm a fan of the Irvine's custom Dog the Dark with his full arsenal, opposite of Kiriko's weapon layout with multiple handheld weapons rather than built-in ones. Turbo Custom from Last Red Shoulder is cool too.
I always like the Bloodsucker.
Oh man.
Yeah.
It's a pretty medieval one.
The Bloodsucker and the Strike Dog is a very close second.
Oh yeah, I forgot about the Strike Dogs.
Strike Dog is pretty nice.
Yeah.
Strike Dog is not. I'm also partial to the Turbo Custom from Lacerate Shoulder. I like that one more than the Turbo Custom from Roots of Ambition.
Mm-hmm.
Lacerate Shoulder has some good designs in it.
Wait, he was asking for Scope Dog variants, wasn't he?
Let's see
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I think he was.
Then I've got to go with the Red Shoulder Custom.
That's a great one. That's mine, to be quite honest.
That's
Arm
actually
yourself to the
that's
teeth.
one of my favorite. Yeah.
He writes, "There's no such thing as a bad AT design." You might be right. You might be right. But back to you guys.
Let's see what else I have here.
Oh, manga. We should talk a little bit about manga.
Yeah, you'd mentioned
There's quite a bit more of it than people realize.
right.
There's the original TV series adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I did not mention about Comic Bonbon is because it was aimed at a younger audience, like 10, 12-year-old kids.
Right.
The art style makes all the characters look younger than they should. I mean, they look like kids and teenagers for the most part.
Right.
That doesn't affect the mecha, but if you're looking for characters that have a closer resemblance to what they look like in the anime,
Mm-hmm.
there are some other options, and they're a little harder to find, but I am using my website to slowly kind of bring them up out of the quicksand. I just finished translating a manga that was in Cybercomics. You remember that one?
Go ahead.
Only through the inheriting the Mecha domain into MAHQ am I familiar with Cybercomics.
That was published by Bandai back in the late 80s, early 90s, and they ran a manga based on a character in Merolink called Keek Carradine.
Great character.
Yeah, they gave him his own story.
Oh wow.
And I've always been really intrigued by what was in that story, so I started translating it. And you can find the first 4 chapters of it on my website, and the 5th and final chapter is going to go live on April 1st.
Oh, nice.
That's
So-
a nice
Well
nice little
timed.
present for VOTOMS fans. Speaking of manga and by extension comics, I want to tell our listeners about Supreme Survivor.
Huh? That was a comic that I was lucky enough to get paid to draw back in 1991, or no, it was more like 94, I think.
Oh.
When the import industry really got going, and I got Central Park Media to import VOTOMS, they brought me on board to help them promote it. And one of the things we came up with was, hey, why not do a comic? Because they got the publication rights to do VOTOMS books or magazines or whatever they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided to adapt Roots of Ambition into 3 issues. They were meant to be a monthly comic, and then we would go into the TV series if it sold well enough. And so I also did the first episode, because the 2 of those stories link together pretty well. Unfortunately, we put out the first issue, and then the entire comic industry collapsed.
Oh, shit.
And so we had to then go with Plan B, which was to do a graphic novel collection. And so that actually did get published. I understand it's pretty rare these days. So if you find a copy, it's not going to be cheap. But I'm still very proud of it. I think it looks as good as anything I could do today. And I loved every minute of that project. It was a dream come true. So that's out there in the wind as well. That's something else I'm going to be putting up on my website fairly soon. But there's other manga to look into as well. There is yet another magazine from a publisher called Futaba called Great Mechanics. Does that one ring a bell?
I'm definitely familiar with that
Okay.
in terms of acquiring line art and whatnot.
Nice.
That started out as kind of a digest magazine, part of a series of other magazines, and occasionally they would publish a volume called Great Mechanics. And it would focus on mecha design, mostly Sunrise anime. And eventually got popular enough to spin off into its own title. And then it kept growing and growing and growing, and now it's called Great Mechanics G, because a lot of the attention they give is to Gundam.
Mm-hmm.
But they still cover other things too. And for quite a while, they were running a VOTOMS manga called AT Stories.
Oh, man.
And this was a spin-off from a series, and it did exactly what they should have been doing in anime, which was to just jump back into that world and focus on other characters and show you what they were doing during the 100-Year War or the aftermath of the war. That to me was where it all should have gone. But they just kept coming back to Kiriko stories because everybody loved Kiriko. Anyway, these other projects did get done, and AT Stories was one of them. And I've got my eye on that one as another translation project in the future. Yazi brought up Blue Knight in the comments here on YouTube. Blue Knight was the first spin-off story, and it was exactly what I just described. It was another character in that world experiencing similar things to what we saw in the TV series, but not identical.
Right.
It's a galaxy at war. There's any number of stories that could be told.
That's one of the best things. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, they decided that early on. They figured that out right away when they started developing spin-off material in Dual Magazine. Yet another magazine. This one came from Takara. And they found great success in this serialized story that was accompanied by custom-made model kits in Dual Magazine. And Dual got canceled, but then they spun that off into a series of novels, and then the garage kit industry grabbed onto that, and Blue Knight garage kits just started pouring out.
Wow.
It's like they couldn't get enough of them. And there was no manga, unfortunately, but eventually they did a PlayStation game.
Oh,
it was really cool. It was the first really playable VOTOMS game. There had been some computer games that came before that, but this was the first that was built as a first-person shooter, the way it should be, and it was just so much fun.
I think I played the PlayStation 2 VOTOMS game. We were messing around on stream. Yeah, I played that, and I thought that was a really nice game. Of course, anime-based video games are usually not the best-made games, but it was just, I was so thrilled to be playing a VOTOMS game that I had a lot of fun just messing around in the opening stages. But I see here on your website you actually have the Blue Knight Berserga. I probably said that wrong, but
no, you got it.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
There's a whole page devoted to all things Blue Knight.
Outstanding. So you guys can check that out at timeldred.com. If you guys haven't been there
I
yet,
always feel that's
make
been
sure
one of the missed opportunities in developing the VOTOMS universe. And it is such a wide universe.
Yeah.
And I feel like, even in anime, stuff like Marrowlink and Case Irvine show, you can do other stories with other characters, and I would have loved to have seen more things like that.
Likewise. I love Marrowlink so much. It's just the David versus Goliath aspect of the story. Oh. And the fact that he's getting revenge for all his teammates. It's edge of your seat storytelling. And just to see him just take out his enemies one by one. It's a series that doesn't get talked about enough.
Of Marrowlink. Now that the animated works are available in the US, do we know at all why it was that Marrowlink was the one thing excluded?
I'm still scratching my head over that one. It probably has something to do with ownership, because these things get made by production committees. And the thing about a production committee is that they're made up of a diverse group of people. Each one has their own interest in what to do, in the marketplace. And in order for something to be exported, they all have to agree that it's a good idea. They all have to nod their head in unison to make something like that happen. And it could be any little thing. Somebody could be just unable to wrap their mind around the fact that somebody in another country would want to see this, or there might be an unrealistic expectation about money.
Yeah, true.
They might look over at some incredibly popular show, like Full Metal Alchemist or whatever, and see how much money that gets per episode. And if you're not getting the same offer for your thing, you might say, nope, you can't have it then. So, these things are just, they're up to the whim of the people who originally finance the project.
Mm-hmm. It's a shame because,
it may have nothing to do with common sense.
Yeah. It's a shame because, I bought, when Sentai started re-releasing things on Blu-ray, I bought their first junky release of the TV series with the very bad video that also plagues Zabungo. Mm-hmm. Then I went and bought their re-release that fixed it, and then after that in Japan they released the Blu-ray version of the TV series. I'm like, well, I guess they're not going to re-release that a third time here, are they?
Well, the ones we got look pretty good. Once they fix that encoding error, we have something that looks just as good as the Japanese Blu-ray box. However, the Japanese Blu-ray box has a lot more stuff in it.
Yeah, I've always been envious of that. We have gotten some nice stuff. Like I remember back in the day when CPM did the ammo box. That was a really nice release.
Yeah, that's what I bought.
Yeah. Hey, you still got that software?
I still own it. Yeah, I still own it.
Nice.
Remember in the early days of Gundam, Chris had exposed this to VOTOMS, and it was like, man, well, this box set's on sale, and it comes in a nifty tin can. I'm gonna get this, and I got it a few days later, and started to watch the show, and been a fan ever since. I'm talking maybe 2009, possibly, or 2008, somewhere around there.
That was Chris was our pusher on that. He was the one that. That's when we slowly when he first kind of added himself to Gundam, and it was like, hey, have you guys? It's like Gundam's cool and all this other stuff is good, but have you ever seen this VOTOMS? And it's like, no, we haven't, but we're interested. And yeah, so we've been fans ever since. So our love isn't as long as others, but I think it's still as strong, and it was good stuff, and I still think it's good stuff, and it really I just love it's so silly because you always hear like the real robot realistic, and I feel like this is like what it would be if we ever got that at that point in our world to have these type of weapons, and it's just
except for the end of Pales and Files when you've got like weird
True.
Cosmic baby stuff, and
I'm not going to that route.
That's going a little wacky.
I'm more like the mecha being kind of more a tool, a weapon, and not falling in love with it. And okay, this one's destroyed beyond belief. I'll just get the next one.
Well, it's kind of like I think it's an evolution of what Takahashi did on Dougram, because Dougram's about guerrilla tactics, and there's a whole episode where they have to steal fuel for it and yada yada, but it's still got pretty invincible Gundam-ish armor that kind of detracts from the realism that's presented in so many other ways in that series. And I feel like VOTOMS really does take it that step further of having Scope Dog really just be a tin coffin piece of trash. Like, they rarely last more than an episode.
Yeah. Which one is it? Is it Last Red Shoulder, where they basically have like the Normandy landing with Scope Dogs? And
those Pales and Files.
Pales and Files. Yeah. So I mean, you just see that carnage, and you see that in other mecha shows where unless you're part of the the main cast or something, you have plot armor, but there it was just like so vicious, and you're just like, wow. And even in the TV show, I mean, you just, the original TV show, it's just not, it's just not fun. It's like, it's almost like you don't want to be a mecha pilot. You don't want to have to, be part of these troops, be an AT pilot. So it's just, yeah, it puts a lot of realism in it, and I think that's what kind of sets it apart. So.
Yeah, it's a world you definitely don't want to live in.
No, not at all.
Terrible world. The murder level in the TV series is just it's so high. Like there's not a single episode that goes by without at least a couple people being killed.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, Macross, it's like, okay, yeah, no problem. I get to go in an F-14 variant, that transitions into a robot. Sure, no problem.
Not so great if you're living on Earth in 2010, though.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Or even if you're a citizen of Macross City and it transforms without giving you fair warning, you get sucked out into space.
Yeah, that's true. So.
Yeah, Astragalus Galaxy is a horrible place.
Woo!
Also, it's full of very ugly men. And there's hardly any women. And, it's not a nice place. It's very dirty.
Yeah.
All I see is sand dunes.
It's the kind of place. It's the kind of place where everybody's packing.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everybody's packing.
You better know Smith and Wesson.
You don't know if you're going to make it back from the grocery store.
Oh.
It's like when I was
true statement.
It's like when I was in Afghanistan. You always had to carry your helmet and your body armor with you, like in everybody else. I've never seen that many weapons around, but yeah. So I worked for the military, Tim. So it's like there was a point where I went over there and in a support role, and yeah, I was in there, and it was like, yeah, I've never seen that before. I guess that's the closest thing every night there's an alarm, every night there's a CRAM going off, so it's like, Jesus Christ. So yeah, not fun. No bueno.
Fun to watch though. I'm a distance.
Yeah, exactly. I would watch stories in this universe all day long.
Yeah.
But to live in it, nah, son, I'm good.
No.
I'm curious, in your many years with this franchise, what's most interesting piece of minutia that you've come across, whether it's like a piece of lore or a piece of merchandise? What's something that really jumps out at you as something like unique and interesting?
Boy, I'm gonna have to think hard about that one. If I just picked through stuff that I can see from where I'm sitting,
sure.
There's the 1/1 scale armor Magnum squirt gun.
Are you serious? Oh wow!
Which is like the size of a rifle. That's really cool.
Huge.
The bonus features that came with video box sets are always really interesting. I might have actually mentioned this in the previous episode. But, that was 200 shows ago, so I don't remember everything I said. But in one of the early Laserdisc box sets, there was a package called like a battling pack.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was full of artifacts like from Udo City.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, they had a coin there. They call it a Gundam. It's an actual like metal coin.
Oh wow!
It's money of Udo. And there's something that looks like a racing form, but it's where you would place your bets on a battling wrestling match.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple other odds and ends. It was really something.
That's cool.
That sounds like really cool keepsakes of that series, especially since a lot of those items you actually see in the show are reference to big moments in the series, and it's fantastic. You know what? I have a question here from MCT Dread in the chat. MCT Dread writes, any unused characters, plot lines, concepts, or concepts that didn't make it to the VOTOMS universe that you found interesting? He also adds, the Juggernaut in 86 reminds me of the Scope Dog. Now that I think about it, poorly made coffins for its pilots. Oof, tough stuff. But anything that comes
I'm I'm not really aware of unused story ideas because right from the beginning they were doing spin-offs, and so I'm hard pressed to think of anything that didn't actually come to fruition in one medium or another. I mean, we had the Blue Knight novels that spun off into model kits and stuff, and then Mirrorlink happened shortly after that. And, then we got the OVAs in the 90s, and other spin off manga. There have been 2 online novels that Ryosuke Takahashi wrote.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What are they called?
Well, the most recent one is called Child of God or God's Child. It's the sequel to Phantom Arc.
Ooh, all right.
Oh, wow.
And it's set a few years later when the little boy that Kiriko adopted is now a little bit older.
Nice.
And can actually pilot an AT.
What happened? I was wondering what happened to that guy.
Well, there is a story. And at some point I'm going to translate it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
There was an attempt to develop Blue Knight as an anime series. In one of the Hobby Japan book specials, there was a script that was written for that. So obviously that didn't go forward. That seemed to me like the natural sequel. It should have happened next.
Man.
Can you hear somebody in the background here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they want to be part of this discussion.
Yeah,
I got something to say.
I think
They're
she's saying,
talking about dogs?
"Squirrel, squirrel."
Do we know if Palesin the character was conceived of or envisioned during the TV series? I think it's interesting, but also weird that he's such a huge part of some of the OVAs and casts such a huge shadow over the TV series, but is not actually in the TV series, nor is he ever mentioned, as far as I can recall.
Yeah, he was never a part of the story until they began developing the OVAs, starting with The Last Red Shoulder, which is his last story. So
yeah,
they wrote the end of his story and then went back and started writing the rest of it, which was an odd choice, but that's what they did.
Hey, if Lucas can do it,
that is an odd question.
Takahashi can do it.
Yeah, why not? Here's another odd thing that answers an earlier question you brought up. In terms of interesting lore. The concept for Armor Hunter Mirrorlink grew out of a drawing that was published in VOTOMS Odyssey.
Oh, nice.
You know what VOTOMS Odyssey is?
Was it a...
I have that book. I have a scan of that book.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was one of the first books that was published that added to the world. Started to look back at the 100 Years' War and the history leading up to what we saw in the TV show.
Oh, man.
And somebody just threw in a drawing of this guy in a poncho with an anti-AT rifle. And the caption next to him described this character as an armor hunter. And their purpose was to go off into the battlefield and bring down armored troopers without using one themselves. And it was that one drawing that inspired a whole new story.
Wow.
That's cool.
That's real. That's actually a cool piece of lore.
Yeah.
The germ of an idea.
Yeah, you never know where these little tiny things are going to lead.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're like the pebbles that get rolled off the top of the mountain. And then they get to the
Kind
bottom
of,
and they flatten the villa.
It kind of reminds me of, I think it was Gundam Century that was like the first book that really started to build up a lot of like background lore of Universal Century, and a lot of which has snuck into the animated canon, like Sydney and all this other stuff. So it's interesting to see like these things kind of get like reverse canonized, starting off as like random things and then becoming part of the story.
Yeah, Gundam Century performed exactly the same role as VOTOMS Odyssey. So we're lucky that there was so much creativity and so much inspiration created by these shows back when they were originally made. People just couldn't wait to start filling them out.
Yeah.
So if we could jump off of VOTOMS for 1 second, because these things didn't exist when we first spoke to you. How do you feel about Yamato 2199, 2202, and 2205 as remakes or re-envisionings of the original Yamato entries? Do you feel that they're successful? Do they live up to the spirit of Matsumoto's original work?
Absolutely. I love every minute of those things.
Outstanding.
And I know that not everybody does. I came into it as somebody who was starving for new Yamato content, and I didn't want it to be identical to the older stuff. I wanted it to have its own spirit and its own purpose, but still be reminiscent enough so that it felt like eating my favorite food again. And that's exactly what it is.
Wow.
And I can't wait for the next thing. They are now up to Be Forever Yamato in terms of the remakes. And they're expanding it into an entire 26 episode series and combining it with Yamato 3, which was made back in 1980-81. And there's so much potential. And they've set it up so beautifully in the most recent series, 2205. I just can't wait to see what they're going to do with it. They also are very respectful of the original, but not afraid to improve on it. Because the original was made in a kind of haphazard fashion. There wasn't always this overarching continuity. Sometimes they would make something up as they went along, and it didn't quite fit in with previous things. And so you've got this crazy tapestry at the end of that run, where the pieces don't always line up as neatly as you'd like them to. And so when they began the work of remaking them, they put all of that stuff on the table and said, how can we pay homage to that and honor those creative choices, but also have them make sense? And they found out with all sorts of new ways to contextualize what was chosen back then. You know, the creative decisions that didn't make sense at the time are now making sense because they've been taking the time and effort to come up with interesting explanations for them.
Yeah, they've meditated.
And so we've got stories that work just as well, but also work on a whole extra level. And I really appreciate that.
It definitely shows that they've meditated on the original story quite a bit to re-envision it the way they have. And on top of that, they've created a whole new generation of fans for Yamato in a sense, between that and its appearance in Super Robot Wars. I forget which one. I think it was X. It was in that. Just to see that it's had this resurgence is amazing. And I wanted to know that answer as well, because I know, of course, you have one of the leading websites about Yamato with rStarblazers.com. For those who don't know, make sure to check out that website as well. Great resource.
At this point, it's the biggest Yamato site in the world.
There you go. In the world.
Yeah.
Nice. Well played.
Yeah.
Wow, congratulations.
That is what's
Thank
up.
you. There are over 1,700 articles on that website.
What?
And if you include all of the extra pages, like art galleries and stuff, there's over 3,000 pages of content.
Fantastic, man. Also, RIP to Leiji Matsumoto as well. His work was phenomenal. Definitely.
He wasn't the central creator of the show. There was a large group of very creative and very smart people working with him.
Oh, yeah.
He was definitely the MVP because he's the one who took what they were doing and said, hey, why don't we do this with it? And everybody said, oh, yeah. And so we have him to thank for the majority of what we now know as Yamato. But I think it's important to give credit to everybody else who worked on it too.
Absolutely, the whole group, creative group behind it, hey, thanks for also shining a spotlight on the entire franchise. And I hope you continue to have content in order to continue to add to the website as well.
Oh, even if they were to stop making remakes tomorrow, there's still loads and loads of of past material. I don't know if it'll ever be all. I don't know if I could ever declare this thing finished.
I hope it never is.
I'll admit that I'm a bad fan and that I've only seen half of first series, but I really did love 2199 and 2202, and I think one of the things that it did really, really good was the aesthetic that somehow was kind of retro, but still modern and futuristic. And I'm not quite sure how they managed to strike that balance, but it somehow just really works for me.
I've always loved that aesthetic. I mean, it's just, I love the fact of like you can be so far in the future, but then they're still using like knobs and dials for things.
Well, Neil, you're a big Harlock guy.
Oh yeah,
I love Harlock is your man.
I love that stuff. I mean, I just love that whole aesthetic of things. And I mean, I remember seeing Star Blazers as a kid on syndication, and it captures me. And you know, I'm a fan. I'm definitely not anywhere near what you would be, Tim, but I mean, I do love it. And you know, watching 2199 a few years ago, I felt the same way. It felt the way they kind of capture, like what Chris says, it's like it's got to be difficult to do that where you just feel like you're not just trying to bring out an old trope or something like that, and it just kind of seemed natural. And I've always loved that. I mean, I love that you know, like even cars that we have, like, you know, now you see a lot of like a lot of Mercedes. They have that old thing of the old Mercedes from like the 1970s and 80s with the big round like AC vents and stuff like that. But then you still have like a whole like, you know, sat nav and all that, which is touchscreen and everything. So yeah, that's always been a cool thing to me. Yeah. And yes, I am big Harlock fan.
Yeah, you've got Leiji Matsumoto to thank for that aesthetic, because as a boy he grew up in the aftermath of World War II.
Oh yeah.
And his environment was just filled up with surplus war machinery.
Mm-hmm.
And he drew this stuff night and day because he was so fascinated by it.
Man.
And so whenever you see a dial or a knob or a wheel on a ship, or an old style CRT monitor, that's all him. That's stuff that he infused into his style in manga, and it caught on with Japanese readers for exactly the same reason you just described.
It's kind of timeless too. I feel like, you know, you look at like, you know, okay, outside like some of the old Harlock, the old Harlock show from the 1970s. Okay, I get the animation, you know, whatever. It's old. I get it. But if you kind of divorce yourself from that and you look at it, that whole kind of universe kind of makes sense. And and that's where I'm kind of going, is like you see that with us in our world now. You know, we have that kind of futuristic retro look to things, and it almost seems like a natural progression where people sometimes they want to look futuristic, but then they want kind of, you know, the ties to the past. You know, it almost harkens to those like things you would see of like in, you know, those old things in like the 1950s and 60s in America, where it's like, you know, and in 20 years everybody will have a flying car, and you know, it's kind of the same thing where they've got like, you know, old like 1950s look, but then they're trying to make it futuristic. But it
has a handcrafted feel.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's intentionally very solid state.
Yes, that's a great description for it.
Yeah, it doesn't feel plastic at all. It doesn't feel mass-produced.
No,
And so
it feels handcrafted. Yeah.
And all of the things that implies kind of activates your imagination.
Yeah.
You know, like an Apollo space capsule.
Yes.
Everything in there was handcrafted. None of it was stamped out in a production line.
Right.
And you feel the weight of that when you look at it, and you feel kind of a faith in how it was put together, because you know that it has care and a soul to it that does not exist in mass production. And when you think about taking a space battleship out into the galaxy, you would want you would want to be surrounded by that same thing, because number one, it would remind you of home, it would keep you grounded. But number two, if your electronics failed, you could always fall back on the handcrafted stuff.
Yeah, and the aesthetic works so well for the series, being that they had to retrofit a battleship in the first place from a previous age.
A 1940s battleship.
Exactly. So it all fits incredibly. You know, I even think that, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but when I watch Super Dimension Fortress Macross and I see the design of the uniforms in that show, you can to me it's clear that Mickey Moto
There's no doubt
was very inspired.
TV series uniforms were inspired by
super inspired.
Dero, they went a different direction. The aesthetic. But unquestionably,
absolutely,
I see the inspiration there.
Well, even Gundam, first Gundam with the First Federation. I mean, it's similar. It has its own little take, but it takes it from there. I mean, and then you have Voltron here, Go Line in Japan. It's the Galaxy Alliance. They basically had the same uniforms. I mean, you see everything kind of that's got like some type of militaristic uniform in the 1970s and 80s. They just take it from Matsumoto. I mean, it's timeless. I mean, it's just because it's got that Navy feel.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, they're in space, but they're still kind of a Navy. So huge impact on that stuff, and it's that whole field. I always get attracted to that, no matter what, that retro futuristic feel.
Robin here writes. Go ahead, Tim.
I was just going to say it's a really appealing fusion of digital and analog.
Yes.
With the best of both. And along these lines, Yazi in the YouTube chat asked if Leiji Matsumoto ever gave a comment or his thoughts on 2199 and the sequels. The answer to that is no.
Oh.
Because by the time they were made, he was no longer part of the Yamato production crew.
Oh, man.
And various legal problems meant that he never would be again. And so he just stayed hands off.
I was hoping they would have him as a consultant or something. That's unfortunate. Darn. Robin writes here, that was an aesthetic in so many Jerry Anderson works in terms of live action stuff with models and all. Like those shows had great machines with retro control interfaces. And I actually wondered who did those works, or did those works influence Leiji Matsumoto? I'm not sure. Robin. That would be. Do you know anything about that, Tim, by any chance?
Well, it wouldn't surprise me. Thunderbirds was one of the most popular things ever to hit Japan from outside the country.
Oh yeah.
They just fell in love with it. Everybody who calls themselves a fan of tokusatsu owes the origin of that to Thunderbirds.
Oh, Thunderbirds! Not the Marvel Spider-Man show from the 70s.
Yeah.
I love that stupid show. It's so good.
I do love Thunderbirds. I forget, like, oh my god, I think it was like sometime around Christmas this past year. Showtime or one of them were showing all those like Thunderbirds movies.
Oh wow.
And I just like Showtime Beyond, one of like the weird Showtimes that you have, and it's like you just get caught up to it because it's the same way. It's 1960s stuff. I mean, that's when Thunderbirds was, and it's like they had so much hope for the future and things, and they just nothing got digitized, but they kind of figured that the world would end up doing things that would eventually have to be digitized, but somehow they would have found a way analog doing it. And it's just I can see why Japan got kind of enamored with that stuff, because you sit there and you're watching like, wow, this is pretty cool. I mean, outside the whole marionette stuff, but hey, it's a different way of doing kind of storytelling, because Thunderbirds has like some of the longest combination scenes of like Thunderbird vehicles on Earth. I mean, it's crazy.
It's funny. They made a film for the Thunderbirds in 2004, and it was directed by Jonathan Frakes. Unfortunately, it's the movie that also got him sent to director's jail. But I never had a chance to see it. But I wonder if they improved upon the transforming information and all that in that movie. But let's see here. Going back to Yazi, he had also submitted this question. Is it safe to say that VOTOMS was the first anime incarnation of POW bunkers / piston weapons in mecha anime? The arm punch POW bunkers VOTOMS have been kind of a staple in various mecha anime / games for a very long time too. He adds.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say yes, and it's probably because of the scale involved. Based on what I was talking about earlier, where they wanted to get a robot the size of a Jeep.
Oh yeah.
When they worked out what kind of weapons you could build into something at that scale, you are talking about hydraulics and pistons and rams and melee weapons and things that work really well at that scale that don't work really well when you get up to the size of a Gundam.
Oh yeah.
Come on, the Gundam hammer.
And you're probably also working with solid round weaponry rather than energy weapons. Whereas Gundam, you get a gigantic
beam saber
body frame.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it becomes nuclear powered because it's big enough to carry a nuclear fusion generator or whatever on its back, and so that opens up your possibility for more energy based weapons. But you get down to scope dog size, you got to get something pretty big that's going to work on that level, and we saw that with the log gun. Remember the log gun?
Yes.
Yeah.
Saw it in the first episode. This giant, bazooka-shaped thing. I think that was probably the only energy weapon we ever saw, wasn't it?
I think so, because I don't recall seeing any other ones, unless there was something in the final act that I don't remember. But I think that might be it.
So there you go.
There you go, man.
So here's a weird question. A devil's deal is offered to you.
Oh.
You can have a guarantee of many more years of anime productions of either VOTOMS or Yamato. But for the one you pick, the other one will never be touched again.
Oh, shit.
I'm going to have to choose Yamato.
I knew it.
Wow.
And it's simply because that's kind of where we already are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought you might choose VOTOMS for the opposite reason, because we've had so much more Yamato recently than VOTOMS.
Yeah. Well, the later VOTOMS anime projects got pretty sketchy.
Yeah.
And so if they continued to be sketchy, then I would have regretted that choice.
Yeah, I'm still befuddled by the existence of VOTOMS Finder. Like, it's very weird, and I don't know what to make of it, even, more than a decade after its release.
Could be alternate universe, could just be another planet in the same galaxy that didn't have any connection to other stuff we've seen. It's still fun. I mean, it's not really a VOTOMS story in the classic sense, but I wouldn't mind seeing more of it if they ever wanted to go back to it.
Yeah, I would just like to know, like, where it actually fits in, if at all, because it does feel so far removed that it's like practically another universe.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're kind of getting Star Wars stories like that now too, aren't we?
Yeah.
True. The Visions. Speaking of animated series, I didn't want to let the episode pass without giving mention to your extensive work as animation director. I know you have a pretty extensive Marvel and DC resume. Is there anything recent you've worked on that you're able to talk about that you want to give mention to here?
Yeah, I mean, I'm working on new stuff all the time. Fortunately, I've been very lucky. My animation career started out in 1996 and has been going nonstop ever since, mainly doing storyboards or directing. And if you go to my website, timeldred.com, you'll see tons and tons of my TV work there too.
Oh, all right.
Yep. And I will tell you this little story. It does not have a happy ending, but it's a good story. Have you ever heard of a little thing called Magic the Gathering?
Oh, of course.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, back in 2021, no, late 2020, I was hired to work on a new Magic the Gathering animated series for Netflix.
Oh, man.
I remember that and wondered where it ever went to.
Yeah, it started at the tail end of the year, and it went for about 12 months solid. We did 12 episodes. I personally directed 4 of them, and it was pretty amazing. And when we got to the post-production, Netflix killed it in the crib.
Oh.
Wow.
Oh, you weren't kidding.
After spending all that money, huh?
Yeah, about a year ago, I got a call from the supervising director saying, "Remember all that work we did? Well, that's all there ever is going to be."
That is all. That's so. That sucks.
It was part of that phase where they discovered this one weird accounting trick where if you spent a whole bunch of money on a TV show and decided never to air it, you could claim it as a tax loss.
Yeah. There's a lot of that going around.
Well, that's the basically the Batgirl situation right now.
That is a David Zaslav move.
Yes. Some Hollywood accountant figured that out, and it was like springtime for Hitler in real life.
Yeah.
You could make more money from a flop.
Oh,
and it caught on like wildfire, and suddenly there were cancellations left and right, and Magic the Gathering was one of them. So we completely storyboarded 12 episodes. There was a voice cast. There were hundreds and hundreds of CG designs, and it was going to look amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, you will never see it.
Oh, that is so sad. I see here you worked on... Oh, go ahead.
It's crazy that would fall through, given that Magic is this global property that is so well known. Like you would think that alone would give it the juice to not get canceled, but apparently not.
Mm-hmm.
I think with a subscription-based type of service like Netflix, that trick probably works really well for them. So I could see that really, because you kind of see that with a lot of their stuff. I don't know how many times you see in that something will do like one season, and then they're like halfway through the second season and they just cancel it. So maybe that's just kind of their business plan at this point. I don't know.
Yeah, well, there's another factor in there as well, which is because of the way deals are structured. If any show gets renewed past season 2, everybody on the crew gets a pay bump.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay.
And so this is why a lot of shows get canceled after their second season.
I've also heard that Netflix, for that reason, will do one order of a show and cancel it, but then market it as 2 seasons.
Yeah.
But really, it was produced as 1, so they don't have to pay anybody more.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty dirty. Wow, that's a real dirty thing.
That's terrible.
Well, I don't know if I necessarily disagree with that approach. It describes the show I'm working on right now.
Oh.
Where we're doing 20 half hours.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And they're going to split it in half and show it as 2 seasons. The only downside for me is that it's going to be quite a while before they're in a position to decide whether or not to continue past that.
Okay.
Are you under NDA for that show, or are you able to announce what that is?
I am not able to tell you what it is.
Gotcha. That's all you have to say. I want to thank you though for working on Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes. That show, low key, is one of the best adaptations of that comic in general, and I didn't realize you worked on it at all.
I storyboarded a bunch of episodes of that. It was a lot of fun.
I got turned on to the show when it was airing on Disney XD. I believe it was Disney XD. Back in the 2010s, and I was quite amazed that it had a continuity to it. You know, like comics do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, usually they'll solve a problem within an episode and then they'll restart the next episode. Earth's Mightiest Heroes wasn't like that. It was in the same vein as Wolverine and X-Men and Spectacular
Spider-Man.
Yeah, and
I worked on Spectacular.
Wow, you worked on Yeah, these great shows have your magic touch, man. I got to tell you, those shows were phenomenal, man. You also worked on.
How mad were you about Wolverine and the X-Men not getting the second season? Because I sure in hell was pretty damn angry.
You were salty.
So I'm sure working on it, you were even more so. Because God, that was good stuff.
To be honest with you, we kind of look at it differently from the production side if we're freelancing. I freelanced on that show, and so it was nice to get assignments, of course, but I was always getting assignments from multiple sources at that time. So I didn't tie my fate down to a single show.
No, I get that.
Good,
yeah,
you got your hands on it. You got a lot of pots. You got a lot of plates spinning.
Hey, you gotta hustle. Yeah. You gotta hustle.
That's the talk.
And it worked.
So, yeah,
I've said many times over the years that I think the best animated shows to ever come out of Marvel were Spectacular Spider-Man, Wolverine and the X-Men, and Earth's Mightiest Heroes, and I think it's amazing that you worked on all three of those.
It was luck and timing.
That's how a lot of things work. That's how the industry works too, man.
Yeah. We have a question from the chat from Mecha-san who says, did you ever meet Greg Weisman?
And he misspelled it, I think intentionally.
Yes.
Oh, no.
Nice VOTOMS tie-in there, Mecha-san. Greg Weisman. It's Weisman, W-E-I-S-M-A-N, I think.
Yes.
Absolutely.
He's a writer who goes back to a series called Gargoyles.
Oh my goodness!
And he's been involved in a lot of high-profile stuff ever since. And yes, I do know Greg.
Oh.
He was the writer on
Spectacular, right?
Yeah, he did write that.
Young Justice.
Young Justice, thank you. That's the other one I was trying to think of. And he's still going. He's still out there. So I have no doubt that I'll work with him again at some point.
Man,
I'm reading his Gargoyles comics right now.
Yes, I just heard that they have I guess they've started them up again. A candid storyline.
Like slipping into an old comfortable pair of shoes.
Oh hell yeah, man! as long as you can just write season 3 off the map, except for the first episode, you're good to go.
What's season 3? There is no season. 3.
There you
There's
go.
Only 2 seasons of that show.
That's the spirit.
Well, guys, what do you say we wrap this up?
Indeed.
Definitely.
But anything that you'd like to any upcoming projects you would like to talk about or share at all? I noticed that you have a graphic novel and
a couple. Yeah, you can find them through my website. That's the hub for everything I do. So once again, that's timeldred.com.
I see here. You also have the graphic novel. I was looking at. Oh yeah, of course. The 2 sites. Pittsburgh.com and GreaseMonkeyBook.com as well. Which is all of Grease Monkey Book on the website?
Everything.
I'm gonna read it then. I'm going to do that.
Yeah, Grease Monkey is a comic that I came up with back in the early '90s when I was sick of comic books and wanted to do something that nobody else was doing, which was something fun that you could enjoy reading. And I've done 2 big graphic novels and a couple of short films, short animated films.
Oh wow!
And it's something I'm going to go back to at some point. And the way I would describe that is it's Planet of the Apes meets Battlestar Galactica.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
But it's funny.
Oh, there you go.
That's awesome.
Which neither of those things were.
No, pretty serious.
Yeah.
And then the other graphic novel is newer, is called Pittsburgh, and it's a sci-fi mystery.
Oh, wow. Good stuff.
Oh.
And it's a story that has 3 parallel narratives. It was very experimental. It was the first webcomic that I wanted to really experiment with and try out new techniques that you could only do on a website.
Right.
And so there's music in it.
Oh, nice.
And
Oh.
there are animated segments in it.
Oh.
And it's a really deep, really intense sci-fi story that was bubbling up in me over many, many years. And I'm glad I finally got it out there. And,
Awesome.
One of these days I'll get started on my next project, which I've been planning for a while, but I just haven't had time to start drawing.
Cool.
Phenomenal.
Definitely.
So just keep tabs on my website and you'll find everything.
Sounds good. Well, Soulbro, you want to tell everyone where they can find us at?
Yeah, I'll just keep it nice and short. Make sure to visit us at mahq.net. That's where the magic happens. Make sure to go there and bookmark the site so you guys can check out for updates and new articles submitted, and also read the articles that are there, as well as the reviews and whatnot for different anime series that are posted there right now. You might find your favorite Mecha anime series reviewed up there, and if so, you should go check that out. MechaTalk.net is the official forums for MAHQ. You can go there and join the conversation, and you guys know where to find us on Facebook and Twitter and Mastodon. And make sure to hit the thumbs up on this video if you're watching. If you like what you see, hit the subscribe button either here on twitch.tv/FightersReady or youtube.com/GundamnMHQ. Other than that, fellas, I'll turn it back over to you guys. Tim, thank you for being on the show again, man. It was fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
I just thought of one other thing I could throw in.
Oh, hit us.
Kind of fun.
Go for it.
Chaser Platoon.
Oh, what's
You guys
that?
know what that is?
Not at all.
That is my comic from 1990, 1991. It started out as VOTOMS fanfic.
Oh, wow.
And just a few years earlier than that, I decided to start creating my own VOTOMS comic just for my own fun. And when I needed a story to turn into a real comic a few years later, I went back to it and I converted it into an original premise.
Mm-hmm.
But it's basically VOTOMS with wallpaper on it.
Oh.
And you can find the original VOTOMS version of the story and the published Chaser Platoon comics at my website too.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Check it out.
See the before and after.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Well, thank you. Thank you, Tim. Hopefully we can talk to you maybe in less than 200 episodes from now. That'd be great. I'm sure we'll probably will. And thank you for joining us. Definitely your insight was great. And, it's great to talk about VOTOMS and going down that little Masamoto tangent that we had there. So thank you on that.
Yeah, I enjoyed this a lot. I'll be happy to come back anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all your insight and all the work you do. And everyone, you listening to episode 272 of Gundam and MHQ. We'll be back in a few weeks. Take it easy. Thank you.
So long.
You have made a mockery of me.
I busted him up.
A very stylish girl. How do I look?
I wish I would have I wish I would have where's my iconic slave role? Hey, motherfucker. I wish I would have all y'all! All y'all! Warp speed, don't rainbow read me! Game over here!
I wish I was Lance Reddick.
I wish I was Lance Reddick! I wish I was Lance motherfucking Reddick!
Thanks, LeVar. That's LeVar Burton.
For real.
That's him, baby.
And that completes the lead.